Scuba Obsessed Weekly Podcast, where we talk about all things scuba diving, from cool new gear to places to dive and scuba news. Scuba Obsessed episode 397 was recorded live February 21st, 2019. Welcome back to Scuba Obsessed. I'm Darren Jolson, coming to you from the southwest side of the great state of Michigan. Joining me this week, we have Mac the Dive Mentor. How you doing today, Mac?
I'm doing very well. The weather outside has moderated tremendously, even though we still have a lot of ice out there.
Yeah, we have ice trying to hang around, but I hear we're going to have some. We're at that time of year where it's not unusual to have above freezing days.
It would be nice to hit the river because I checked it today and we had over 3-foot visibility.
Oh, wow. That's much better than I thought we would have.
Yeah, that's just looking straight down.
You know, it almost doesn't make sense because we were at flood stages just a week ago.
And this isn't a flooded area. That surprised me. You know the new bridge they just put in from Benton Harbor over to the inn in St. Joe?
Yeah. I
was out there playing around again, pictures. And I'm looking down where I normally dive at, and it's like, damn. I got every bit of 3-foot visibility.
Huh.
So with a light, I bet I could have had some fun down there.
Yeah, cleaned up.
There was a good bit of ice around, so I don't, you wanted to take a nice line, but.
Well, certainly.
Looked interesting.
Yeah. Have you done any diving near the new bridge yet?
No, I have not. I got some surgery scheduled for next week, so I'm going to be out of service for, he said, anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, 6 to 8 weeks. They just can't super glue or anything? That can't take care of it?
Nah, this is going to be a little more invasive than super glue.
Oh, okay. Because you just got to seal the holes up. Otherwise, you're fine.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess that's why I'm not a doctor. Well, let's go ahead and jump right on into the news. Before we get going, I'd like to thank everybody who's in the chat room. We have Derek. I guess some of the other diehards aren't in there tonight. We do have Craig. We got Craig to join in.
I was going to say, Craig is always there, hopefully. Yeah. And hopefully stays the whole time, too.
Yeah, sometimes he's a little flaky. And for those who don't know, that he's the recording robot who records the episode. So as long as he's in there and doing okay and we got good bandwidth, we'll be fine. So let's look at this first article we have this week. And this one, I think it's from Texas area. It says, Thieves target scuba store in Frisco, Plano. And there's a video that goes along with this. Tens of thousands of dollars worth of scuba gear was stolen from 2 small businesses in Collin County. The burglaries happened at Scuba Frisco and Adventure Scuba in Plano. In the Scuba Frisco break-in, 2 men were seen on surveillance video rushing into the store with white trash bags. They begin to grab gear off the shelves, and they aren't bothered when the alarm goes off. Store owner Thorsten Prutz said he had been alerted to the break-in by a security company and watched it happen on his tablet at home live. You are in shock, he says. There's nothing that can describe it. You just see it taking place. You see dollars disappearing from your place of business. Prutz said that more than $15,000 worth of equipment was stolen, including air regulators, buoyancy control devices. He said the thieves stole what they likely thought were dive computers, but they're actually fakes used for displays. Frisco police are looking for 2 suspects along with a person of interest who Prutz said was in the store days earlier. Adventure Scuba in Plano was also broken into just before 11 p.m. on January 31st, shortly before the Frisco burglary. The owner reported more than $17,000 worth of similar equipment stolen. He said he's turned over surveillance video to police and believes the same people were responsible. Police have not said whether the cases are related. And I watched the video, and they didn't hide themselves as much as you would think for breaking in.
Up into the end. I mean, first they had their back turned to the camera, But like you said,
Yeah.
leaving, and the one guy's hoodie almost came off. And
Yeah.
then looking at the still photos, if you know these people, you will recognize them from these photos.
Yeah. And the police did. I went over to the police Facebook page, which was listed in one of the articles because we have 2 articles that were covering this, and they went through the video of the store for like the previous 2 weeks, and they think that they had been in there casing it. So they've got a person of interest that they're looking for, and so they're asking people to if they recognize anybody, and they show the person of interest and the 2 in the hoodies.
Did they say whether or not the other store had video also?
It said that had been turned in, so it sounded like that the other store had video.
That would be cool because between the 2 of them, and again for 2 weeks, person of interest, if he was in both shops, you can be pretty much assured that there was some collusion there.
We just have to hope none of the shops that we go into regularly get burglared because we would hit them all.
Well, you just watch eBay for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that they must have thought that this is going to be something they could easily fence. So I'm guessing either they've got a place that said that they would take it, they had kind of pre-sold it, fenced it, or they were planning on doing eBay deals.
I know that when you get skydiving gear stolen, it gets reported really quick, and all the drop zones and people, because your rig has got a serial number, your canopies have serial numbers, your AED has serial numbers, and most guys will post then, this is what it looks like, blah, 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 blah. And the majority of people who are out there buying gear will check this to make sure they're not buying something that's not appropriate to buy.
That's good that they're looking into it. I watched the video, and they had obviously cased the store because of how quick they were moving.
Yeah,
but there was one, and they were going past. There's like some BCDs, and they were like grabbing them. There's one they went by like, oh, I don't want that, and then in the end, he ended up grabbing it anyway. So I was trying to see if there's anything you could read into that. Is that what did that mean?
If there's any local dive clubs, it'd be really good to contact them too.
Yeah, because that was a lot of gear. I mean, that just in that one video, 6 or 7 BCDs, and I don't know where the guy was. The other guy in the shop was kind of in the back in the dark, and it looked like maybe he had some regulators.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a lot of gear. They're not doing it for personal use, I'm guessing. I wonder if maybe that one.
You got the report on that. That'd be good to check back in a week or 2 and find out really what happened on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if maybe the reason the guy didn't grab that one is maybe it was a child size, so he just thought, maybe I didn't want it. But then he had room because what they did is they had the trash can with white trash bags in it. I don't know if they brought the trash cans in with them or they just knew they were there and used them.
Yeah.
Well, this next one is a follow-up. Florida, which is the FWC, it's a Florida and Wildlife.
That stands for Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. I looked it up.
Well, there's not enough letters for that. It just says FWC.
I know. That I figured it out, and then I Googled it to find out. Said, what the hey? That's pretty big.
Yeah. So FWC deems taking tropical fish from Blue Heron Bridge illegal. And we looked at this, was it 2-3 months ago? There was a big movement going on. So Blue Heron Bridge is a special place. It really is the place where people all over the world come, and it's international recognition to Skip. Oh my goodness. Kumaraj, owner of Force E Scuba Shop. He's been diving the Blue Heron Bridge and helping others enjoy it for decades. He says the site became more and more popular. People found exotic species. We started to get more and more collectors. People were taking unique wildlife, something that was completely legal, but one incident really brought it to light. The aquarium in Texas, Moody Gardens, was accused of taking thousands of fish. CBS 12 News caught on camera divers loading up buckets in the box truck, and later a local conservationist gave CBS 12 video of FWC investigating the same box truck. Moody Gardens claimed it only took the amount of fish they were, in the article it says illegally allowed to. I'm sure he said legally allowed to. Turns out they had a FWC permit, which FWC revoked. It's just underlined the problem. You can't have an area as specialist as the Blue Heron Bridge without special protection against collections, said Dan Volker, a member of the Blue Heron Bridge Preservation Initiative. The group really spearheaded this push. Wednesday, FWC followed through, something Volker and other members were elated about. Kamaraj, am I saying that right? Sometimes you look at a word and it just doesn't come.
Close enough.
Yeah, we'll say that was fine. Said it's great for people enjoying area and local businesses. He says it's a huge economic boom for Palm Beach County. And then that's the end of the article.
Well, I was curious about that, and I tried to find out what were the conditions for a permit. I could not find anywhere where they had a permit or they issued a permit, because every time you looked on that, it said, this is not covered at this time. So they must be modifying that. But I looked that up, and I was curious because they have two licenses there. Oh, let me rephrase that. They have a saltwater fishing license, or licenses, and saltwater fishing permit. All right, so that said permit, so I was looking under permits. And it said Florida residents who only have a saltwater fish license can fish from the land or a structure, or they can wade out until they don't touch the bottom. All right, and there's no cost to get it, but you got to have it if you're a resident. The license does not cover anyone fishing from a boat or from an island that they arrived at by boat. And then it's individuals who hold a recreational saltwater fishing license or any other license that includes recreational saltwater do not need a shoreline permit, which to me is, hey, get one for a boat and then you're covered for the shoreline.
Right.
And the cost was very, very good. I mean, not very much at all. But yeah. I looked through it, and it said Florida requires permits for wildlife possession, exhibition, and sale. But none of the items that you'd find under that were on that listing. Not to mention, it is legal to take samples for your aquarium.
Yes.
But there is a limit of, I think it was 20 per day of a certain type.
Right. And
so
20
thousands,
per day.
Yeah, thousands is something. But if they had a permit, then they were not illegally taking it if they were issued that. So I don't think they should get on the people's case.
No, they shouldn't. I think this is a case of the public perception in that particular location was that nobody should be doing any collection, and they just, highlighted it.
Right. And they can, in fact, do that as long as they notify people and, do the proper postings. Because there are certain areas in all the vast lands of Florida that you have to have some other special permit to dive there, not dive, but to collect vegetation samples. Because there's like 3 different classifications for aquatic animals, land animals, sea animals. It was quite interesting.
Yeah, it's, as long as they're looking at the broad picture, is this really impacting the environment? Are there specific species that need to be protected and others that are plentiful? Is it just this particular location? It sounded in the articles when we covered it before, a lot of it was, well, that's where I dive, so I don't want anybody to take anything.
And it didn't sound like it had thousands and thousands that you would want to take.
Yeah. And is part of this because of that bridge that it makes it for easy access? So they're in an area that, a collector finds nice, because you're talking about the type of permit and whether it was from a boat or an island. Well, if you don't have to get to the island by a boat, it's that bridge. I don't know. Is that maybe what they were doing?
Well, I couldn't get a copy of the permit because I'd love to have seen that. And I knew you can rescind one, but stay off their case. If you issued it, stay off their back, terminate it, issue is over.
Yeah. Well, and it's So they're now saying that if you take from the bridge, it's now illegal.
That's what it appears to be in that area. That area.
Yeah. Because I found another article, which was like from the day before, which is almost a duplicate of this one, saying that it may become illegal. So I'm guessing whatever hearing or legal process they had, they made the decision. And then the Deepwater Horizon oil spill is corroding away Nazi subs and shipwrecks. The Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig in April of 2010 sparked a large environmental crisis. Over 4.9 million barrels of oil gushed into the Gulf of Mexico, leading to damage to marine life and a wider ecosystem. A new study has highlighted another unexpected victim of the oil spill, Nazi submarines. Writing in the Journal of Frontiers and Marine Scientists, led by the University of Southern Mississippi, have now detailed how Deepwater Horizon oil spill is subjecting the area's historical shipwrecks to more corrosive water, causing them to disintegrate at a startling rate. The metal from one wreck in particular, German submarine U-166, has experienced a huge amount of corrosion. The submarine was in the Atlantic Ocean during World War II on a mission to sink merchant ships and naval vessels, an operation known as the Second Happy Time or the American shooting season to the Germans. The U-166 sank numerous U.S. ships during this, but the troublesome sub was eventually sunk by a depth charge in the summer of 1942 by a U.S. ship captained by Herbert Claudius. The wreck is laid in the seabed of the Gulf of Mexico ever since. It was hunted down by archaeologists' survey in 2001.
Well, I looked that up too because I was quite interested. The way they reference it, corroding away Nazi subs. Well, the UC or the U-166 rests in 5,000 feet of water, some 50 miles southeast of New Orleans. Like you said, it was located in 2001 after some research. And who's going to go down there and check it out? How can they make that determination about the metal if they only found it in 2001 and it's a recent item?
Right.
But the key item that they talked about, it said, strangely enough, the recent problem with corrosion actually has its roots in bacteria living on the seafloor. The researchers argue, meaning they haven't concluded this is correct, argue that the influx of crude oil has provided the area's anaerobic bacteria with carbon and sulfur to munch on. With a surplus of energy, the bacterial communities have boomed and formed a dense biofilm of microorganisms that can easily stick to surfaces like a ship's hull. Unfortunately, this biofilm pumps out a corrosive byproduct that can degrade metal. Now, the reason I find that interesting is if you look at the secretions from quagga and zebra mussels on metal, they do the same thing.
Yes.
So I don't know if they're searching or not, but hey, it's just not oil that's been on the that leaked to the bottom. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, not that I'm it's going to sound like I advocate oil going in the water, but what we're seeing here is that nature's way of combating things that it finds in the environment, such as oil. So there's bacteria present in the Gulf of Mexico that when the oil, when it comes in contact with oil, the bacteria will create a bloom or grow at a rate more than what they can normally sustain. And you're going to see that, and it takes a little bit of time for these bacteria to ramp up. But now that they're there, they're slowly going to, or maybe not even slowly, they're going to work their way through all that exposed or fresh oil, relatively fresh, and consume it.
And the deterioration of the hull, though, it's like the Titanic. They figured that one's going to be gone in a few more years.
Yes.
Now, they're saying that was because of the different types of metal used during that period and the environment it's in. Mm-hmm. The metal that the ship was generated in or created the submarine back in the early 40s would also be of a different construction. So perhaps it's the manufacturer of the different steels and iron that are also making it more susceptible to this kind of corrosion?
It's possible. I'm certainly different alloys will have properties that may make them resistant to bacteria. That bacteria naturally might not be able to do anything with, or it takes them longer or more effort.
Yeah.
But what I think this is calling for is that they need to raise these submarines and as a preservation effort, put them in Lake Michigan.
Hey, I'm all for that.
Yeah, see, because then we could dissolve all that, the nasty buildup that's been happening, and then we know that fresh water can help preserve it. If you put it at about 120 feet of depth, then you don't have the nasty salt water reacting with the metal.
Well, we already have a nice German submarine here in our own backyard.
Yep. So they could put it right next to it.
I think if they brought it inland to our neck of the woods at 120 feet, it would prevent them having to go through and do any ecological studies when they bring it up and preservation. We'll save them millions.
Yeah, it's preserve almost in place, preservation in place. Isn't that what that's called? Yeah. So I think we solved it.
Well, we'll just have to broadcast out there and try to get them to go along with us.
Yeah. And then here's one from last week's episode. Loves Park scuba divers await world record status. Things didn't go as planned for scuba divers Jackson Bolselman and 4-year-old with autism and William Lambert, nearly a centenarian. Well, they traveled to Cozumel, Mexico to break some world records, but the scuba diving record may have been broken nonetheless. Both are waiting to hear from Guinness World Records, even though Jackson wasn't allowed to dive at Hotel Cozumel because of his age. I shouldn't laugh, but wouldn't you have checked that out?
You would think so. But by the same token, they could have got on a boat, gone offshore someplace, and still done it if it was that much of a... You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go to a beach, go out in 11 foot of water and do it. So, maybe they had second thoughts.
Yeah. He has made at least 60 dives in 11 feet of water at Loves Park Scuba and Snorkel Shop. Although he didn't dive in Mexico, he dives in Loves Park are being submitted to Guinness for consideration. Lambert made a request number of open water dives in effort to become the oldest scuba diver by 3 years, but he slipped them some tiles while taking a post-dive group photo. His arm needed about 30 stitches, 15 inside and 15 outside in a trip home stat. Videos, birth certificate, and other proof and dives and birthdays have been submitted. Dan Johnson of Love Park and Scuba and Snorkel and Marcela Castillo, Jackson's mother, submitted videos of the dives at the scuba shop for Jackson. They'd like Jackson to become known as the youngest scuba diver. The child wasn't able to dive in Mexico, but he was still in the boat the divers plunged from. Being on the water, Jackson saw the cruise ship and decided he wanted to own one for the future, and he made sure to swim in the hotel pool every day. He was so well behaved on the plane ride, says Castillo, whose son's behavior also calmed since he's been scuba diving with enriched air called nitrox. He did really, really well, but he kept saying he wanted to dive and he couldn't dive. The diving began 2 weeks ago. Johnson and Lambert were required to make 4 dives to break the record. Johnson was also watching over several students and some of their relatives. Lambert's daughter was one of the scuba divers who entered the water with her father. It was great. I can't say enough about how good it was. I've got to thank Dan. Without him, I never would have been able to do it. Experience was wonderful. Lambert's 99th birthday is September 5th, according to Johnson and Castillo. Yeah, the best laid plans. Hopefully he heals up pretty well.
Yep.
And then since we're on records, we have a gentleman who set a record in scuba cycling. The article says people tend to go pedaling through different terrains, mud trails and concrete roads along coastal plains, along the sand, snow, and slush. But Mumbaikar has taken his passion for cycling into territory you wouldn't dream of underwater. You wouldn't know that I picked these articles. It's almost like I've looked for the worst names. Nishant K. Patel, an entrepreneur from Valparaiso, holds a record as the world's fastest, second deepest scuba cyclist in the world. A video of Nishant's battles the deep as he cycles in the bed leaves you awestruck, though impossible and scary are just some of the words that come to mind with it. But the 37-year-old maverick, as he likes to call himself, laughs it away. It's not tough. I've always believed the desire to succeed should be much greater than the fear of failure. And as they say, no risk taken, no risk gained. A cycling buff, he regularly rides with a group in the city on various trails. He is also a certified downhill cycle racing specialist. I have taken cycling events, races in India, including the coveted route from Manali to Corroding, and finishing a grueling tour of Nalgiris, which covers some of the toughest slopes in the southern region of India, despite nursing a gout attack in the middle of the tour he shares. 2 years ago, the question, what's next, hit him like what he does with most adventures, so he decided to combine his two interests as an avid cyclist and a diver and thought of conquering the depth through scuba cycling in open sea. I was always within me to challenge myself. I was not a certified scuba diver then, so I read more about it and went on to gain the required certifications. The first underwater adventure was in the swimming pool. It felt amazing, gave me a rush, which I realized was just a drop in the ocean. The real thing would be so much bigger, he states. Neshant took off to practice at 5 to 7 meters depth in water to set a world record at depth of 30 plus meters under sea. This was to understand how the geometry of cycles would work, what the ocean bed would be like. For instance, the wheels won't work well in sand, but they can move on rock beds. He also had to figure out weights and needed to add to help me and my cycle maintain buoyancy. It took Nishant 6 months to practice prepare. I had to see how long I could balance in the bike. The most important thing was to be able to pedal fully and make a complete rotation of the chain wheels. After the dynamics were in place, it was time to attempt a record. It wasn't all smooth. I had to deal with Murphy's Law at the last minute since the place where we practiced had a strong ocean currents that morning. We shifted to a second location. The currents there, too, were not as strong. It was the only option, so I had to decide to either take up the challenge or tank it. Before I plunged in the water, all I was thinking is, this is it. There's no turning back, and I've got to get to the finish line. It was tricky as I was focused harder and put more weight in the front of the cycle to prevent it from going up as the currents were changing. The tracks also changed as the bottle markers on the floor of the ocean started moving. During the stint, I came upon crevices and corals, so I had to change the route sideways to avoid damaging the fan corals in the cycle, he adds. There was a dangerous point midway with excessive pressure almost caused Nishant to collapse. He says, I felt my life flashing before my eyes as my heart rate escalated to 200 plus. It took a few seconds, and suddenly I was able to cycle again with renewed energy. It was as though God had given me another chance. The target was to complete at least 100 meters based on the calculation. Everyone was prepared that it would take 18 minutes, but I achieved the target of 100 meters in 6 minutes and 47 seconds, which is way less than half the time. As a result, the team was not ready for me as they didn't anticipate I would finish so soon. They were surprised when I did so. I mean, that. What do you thought of that? Was it just overexertion where he almost collapsed and felt my life flashing before my eyes?
I haven't got a clue. Did you look at the video?
No, I wasn't able to watch the video.
It seems to me I'd have practiced in the pool and got really good first, because of my first question is, number one is, I thought we're not supposed to touch the bottom when we're diving because of fish, vegetation, not to mention coral, because coral, he went around it. But isn't that true? Isn't what we're really supposed to do is stop, hitting the bottom? So
it's bubbles.
Maybe that was not a good thing there. But the second item is, if you balance the unit in your pool at 15 feet, to me, you could set it up so you're already set the balance. So I'm not sure why that was an issue. Second of all, if there was an issue on left and right, keeping it up, why not put training wheels on it? That's acceptable.
I'm not sure.
But now I want to go out there and try it on a bicycle.
Well, I like the bike. I think he chose a good bike, don't you?
Yeah, that's a nice bike.
Yeah, that's a good size. It's a smaller wheeled bike, and so it makes it easier to get on, because I imagine you fall to the bottom almost, and you're going to be a little bit heavy because you need to be able to keep it down. But I would get the bike balanced so that just the bike on its own should be fine.
Yeah. And I'd use the big tires, not the skinny ones. That's for sure. Like the big ones they now have.
Yeah, those fat bike tires.
Yeah, fat type. And
would you put water in them?
I wouldn't. Well, yeah, now that you said that, though.
Yeah, it goes like I'm thinking of. You add quite a bit of buoyancy.
Yeah.
Unless, well, how's this for a winter sport? Maybe you leave the air in it and you do it in like how they have hockey under the ice. Why not riding under the ice?
Well, now I'm just thinking, now that you just said that, if I have my tire pressure and some of the skinny tires, you've got 90 pounds in it, so they're not going to collapse too much. But if you had 32 pounds in a tire, you go down that much.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to have a flat tire.
Yeah. So I think you just put water in it.
You use that, what is that, sealed leak? Just fill up the whole tire with that seal leak. Let it turn into a solid.
That green slime.
Yeah, that green slime.
Yeah,
but we need to do that. Somebody would let us borrow a bike, and we could get YMCA to let us go down there.
Do you tell them what you're going to use the bike for? Can I just use your bike?
Well, if you bring it out and dry it real quick, should be okay.
We're going to wash it.
Yeah.
Yeah, clean it.
I'm not sure if the water gets into the axle, though.
It gets everywhere.
Everything else you could just steam clean real quick.
Well, we know we found a bunch of bikes in the water, but this would probably be the first time we'd actually taken one down. This sounds like a challenge.
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, we find enough junk and sometimes new ones. So we're going to have to just try this summer. Then we'll do our own report.
Yeah, well, and then the chat room is saying that Mythbusters had an episode where they tried to ride a bike under the water.
Really? What'd they say?
They said they would have been more successful. They had less slippery bottom. And now that he's saying it, I kind of remember it. This is fairly early on, one of the earlier episodes, I think, where they did that. I'll have to do some looking up. Huh. Yeah.
Remind me, I'm going to put this on the club site, make a comment on this.
Yeah. Well, see, Lake Michigan would be perfect because you got the sand bottom. Now, they said it didn't go good in sand, but maybe we just need to make a tracked version.
We'll go out there where the clay banks are.
Ooh,
that's hard bottom.
Oh, yeah. Then you could do some interesting things because you could just about I'm sure you could launch over a 4-foot gap.
Oh, I wonder if we could put an electric bike down there.
Ooh, there you go, scooter.
Yeah. Okay, now we're getting radical, but hey, that does sound interesting.
Yeah.
Food for thought.
Well, you could create you could have like a bike racing league, televise it.
Well, I've done tricycles under the ice, and they work. Skiing under the ice, that works. So now I say that we'll put nails in the solid tires on the bike, ride that upside down. That should work.
Yeah. Okay. Now, there's something in there. We're not done with this one. I'll have to see some more stuff.
It has planted a seed.
That's a dangerous thing. Ale from 1886 shipwreck yields a new brew and a conflict. News that an upstate New York brewer planned to recreate an ale from a bottle salvaged from a 1933-year-old shipwreck took the wind out of the sails of scuba diving Long Island brewer who has already done it. Jamie Adams, owner of St. James Brewery in Holbrook, said Wednesday he has plans to release his new ale next month. He created it from yeast he painstakingly cultured from bottles of English ale he salvaged in 2017 from the wreck of the SS Oregon, which sank off Fire Island in 1886. Adams, who'd been diving in a 135-foot wreck for nearly 20 years, was stunned when he Saw an Associated Press story over the weekend describing another brewer's plans to use the Oregon yeast. One of the divers I had enlisted to help me find the bottles with the intent of making beer given one of them to this other brewer unbeknownst to me, Adams said. Adams learned that about it when the State University of New York and Cobleskill announced that students are trying to culture yeast from a shipwreck bottle given to Bill Feather of Serious Brewing and Howe's Cave. The plan was for Felter to create a new beer if the students were successful. I called Felter and he agreed not to use the yeast, Adams said. I'm glad we could work out amicably without having to take legal action. Felter told the Syracuse Post-Standard he had scuttled his plans out of respect for his fellow farm brewer. I didn't want to step on their toes. The Oregon, which is near and dear to Long Island scuba divers, said Adams was a former Wall Street trader who took up brewing and diving after 9/11. He was in the Titanic of its day. It was built as a luxury liner to ferry people between New York and Europe. The wreck is 75% buried in the sand, which shifts after storms to uncover various portions of the ship. In 2017, we found an area around first-class dining room was accessible. It hadn't been for years, Adams said. Adams and fellow divers used the dredge to uncover artifacts, including china, silverware, bottles of ale with corks intact. Thorough research, he determined the bottles contained classic English ale. We've opened a few and been able to propagate a few different yeast strains, he said. After making numerous test batches since 2017, Adams had a yeast strain he was confident would perform properly. We're calling it Sea King New York Ale. Adams said it was to debut on March 9th at the annual New York Craft Brewers Festival in Albany. Do you think it's going to taste that much different from ales that are currently being brewed in England?
Well, the two articles, you have them both together. The ale from 1886 and Upstate New York goes together.
Yep.
Well, part of that, when they were discussing this in one of the reports, I consider clickbait, because immediately they go says, who can say who the owner is of the whenever they take that off of the old beer? Well, who really owns that yeast? It's like, excuse me, is that really an issue? Then I looked it up, and this is not unusual. It's been done before in other places.
The cultivating of the yeast?
Yes, from things like this from the sea bottom.
Yeah, because we've covered articles 6 or 7 times, different parts of the world where people have found it. I mean, we had that one real recently. Was what the guy was down in Australia or something. I'm trying to remember New Zealand maybe. But yeah, this is, and they do that, but are they saying that the yeast changes over time? Now I can appreciate our taste may change or develop. But
I don't know. I really don't know how to make beer, and I certainly don't know how to take something off of a bottle that's 100 years plus and then develop something from it.
Right. Well, I mean, because look at your classic brews in the U.S. or around the world. They all claim to be brewed since, who knows. So
well, you figure the other reason they landed at Plymouth Rock is because they ran out of beer.
Is that the story?
Well, it is. When you run out of, why do you drink beer all the time back in the old days?
Because the water was no good.
Absolutely. So once you ran out of good drinking stuff, meaning that's what's been brewed, boiled, they had to land and make more beer. That's what I heard.
Oh, okay.
Makes more sense.
It does. Plus, you have to have priorities.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anybody wants to send us some, I'll just make arrangements.
we missed you at AJ's yesterday.
Yeah, I know. That was because you had the Mud Club meeting this week, and that was our last day to work on the competition robot before I had to go in the bag for the robotics team.
Well, they gave us the back room, and we filled up 2 tables. Almost everybody at the meeting went.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I was very surprised and pleased. So good turnout.
So you went to AJ's?
Yeah.
I was Did you see that there's new owners of Roma's now?
I heard the old man was back, but they did sell it, but I haven't heard any other details.
Yeah, it's sold. The name's going to change. I think it's going to be, and this is incredibly local, non-scuba news. Uptown Pizza is the one that's going to be next to AJ's, which that opened about a week ago.
Yep.
And this one was Town Hall Pizza is going to be the old Roma's.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if they have better hours and if they have, the special salad like they used to, and they're going to be open past 9 o'clock.
Yeah. They didn't have the pasta for a while. Now they've gone in. The people who bought it owned a pizza company down in Indiana, which is called the same name, Town Hall Pizza. Yeah, Town Hall Pizza. But they do take credit cards now, which is you wouldn't think is a big deal. But there's been times where you're like, crap, you got to run to the ATM to get cash to come back to go and have a pizza. So.
Oh yeah.
Well, cool. It sounds like you had a great turnout.
Yeah, we did. Good meeting.
So we got a couple more articles. We have there's another one from India, and we'll just highlight over it. But this was a story about a person who was looking for a plane that his father had rescued the pilot from in 1964. His grandfather, who was a fisherman, had rescued a pilot when the aircraft had crashed in the water, and the person flying it was somebody who he was in maintenance, and he'd been rejected from being a pilot. So he took the jet out and then didn't know how to land it. So he ended up being the only landing on water by a jet in India. So the fisherman's grandson is the one who he'd been searching for it since 2010 and finally found it.
That actually was pretty interesting because I looked that up.
Yeah.
And the interesting part, and I just sent you a link on that, the carrier, INS, Bearcat, means courageous. It was initially the one that the aircraft was from was a Majesty class aircraft carrier of the Indian Navy. The ship was laid down as the HMS Hercules from the British Royal Navy during World War II. Well, at the war, when it ended, they put it on hold, and India purchased that incomplete carrier in 1957. It was completed in 1961 and was commissioned as the first aircraft carrier of the Indian Navy. First of all, I didn't realize they had an aircraft, but they did. And it was commissioned, and played a key role in enforcing the naval blockade of East Pakistan during the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, which, being an American, most people had no freaking clue that other people were fighting.
No, there's conflict that we're not involved in.
Yeah. And it was decommissioned in 1997. And like you said, this gentleman here, it did not say if he took off from the aircraft carrier, which I find hard to believe. If you look at the picture I sent over, it's a jump carrier, the one that's got the deck that goes up.
Oh, yeah.
It's quite interesting. And the other aspect is they are now building their own. It's also going to be called the same name, Bearcat. I'm pronouncing that wrong. And that'll be the first aircraft carrier built in India, by India, for India. And it's going to be out of dry dock. It should be out of dry dock now in 2011. And was launched in 2013, meaning out of dry dock. And as of 2018, it was to be completed, starting its 2 years sea trials. So it's supposed to be functional in October 2020. And what I found interesting is the jet that's going to be on it in 2021 is the Mikoyan, meaning Russian Soviet jet, MiG-29K. So it's funny that you had an old jet, British or old carrier, a new carrier with same name, really sophisticated. Interesting. Now I got to go look afterwards just and find out how many people other than them and North Korea and China have carriers.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of surprised that India went with Russia. Now I think, that might, well, that's another podcast, because I think there's a economic
Yes.
currency thing going on there. You got the BRIC, Brazil, India, Russia, China.
Yep. Try and do away with the dollar and go back to the gold standard.
Yeah. So I'm sure that's what it was, is that they were trying to navigate around that.
Yep. Economics rule the world.
Well, right. Plus, they're getting tired of us always getting mad at them and then messing with their bank accounts.
Yeah.
And then we make the rich people unable to travel to the United States, which also kind of ticks them off. Let's see. The next one we have the talk on the excavation of Phoenician shipwreck off Gozo. After 10 years of exploring the surface of Phoenician shipwreck off Zelde Bay, a team led by University of Malta has planned and executed the world's first archaeological excavation by divers at a depth of more than 110 meters. The talk, switching below the surface, excavating the Phoenician shipwreck off Gozo, covers aspects related to logistical preparations prior to the diving, new methodologies used for scientific work at this depth, as well as the results have emerged from the past 2 seasons of investigations. Timmy Gambin, senior lecturer in maritime archaeology, Department of Classics Archaeology, University of Malta, will be giving the lecture tomorrow at 6 p.m. in the National Museum of Archaeology. This was February 18th on Monday, so they've already given that talk. But that's quite a depth to be doing archaeological work.
330 feet. I'm curious. Well, obviously they're going to be using submersibles. It's got to be.
Well, no, they're talking divers.
But how much time you got down there? You're going to do SAT? That's crazy.
I don't know. I mean, that was the whole point. I mean, because submersibles, they've been doing archaeological work with submersibles. This is the diver. So, yeah, maybe you are going to do SAT. Would that be the way you do it? Set a habitat up down there and you put the divers down there and they just work for a week?
Well, I'm looking at the Exploring the Shipwreck. It's a whole new series here. And it's one darker than blazes, that if you didn't have the lights I'm looking at, all the divers I see are definitely rebreathers. Mm-hmm. And some of the stuff is outstanding, let me tell you. Oh, let me send that to you. You might want to look at that.
Okay.
I know I'm having fun looking at it. Let's see. Did that come to you?
Yep.
If nothing else, the pictures are awesome. Because that one had the excavation, which is that down line. This is actual on the bottom. And that's supposed to be, 2,700 year stuff.
Well, and you think at that depth, it's probably in better shape than shallower wrecks. Plus, do sponge divers ever get down that deep?
I don't think so. No.
No, I think it's, I know they've gone as deep as 200 because of that Antikythera wreck that had been picked over by sponge divers.
Right. Well, I'm looking at some of the jugs and stuff, and I'm familiar with the long extended amphora jugs, and these are not. These are more looking like the jugs we have, except they're wider mouth and handles. It's pretty interesting. This is, they could recover this stuff very easily because it's just littering the bottom. Did you see the pictures yet?
No, my internet's...
No? Okay.
Oh, wait. Well, here they come. Whoa, yeah. I see
yeah.
what you're talking about. Ooh.
Something else. Is that enough stuff on the bottom? We could do an ecology dive there.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, give us 8 hours and some tarps and we'll fill them up.
Yep. It's hard though. You're looking at that one field and I couldn't, is that a skull or is that a bottle? I couldn't tell the difference. Or a jug. That's cool, isn't it? I'm pretty
sure they're jugs. Yeah, and that's probably the shape of the vessel. That's why they're all in that row. It was probably the vessel settled in the bottom, and as the wood rotted away, the jugs were what was left.
I'm looking at this one guy. They've got the grid work on the bottom. I can see 4 tanks hanging off his body, not counting what's on his back and off to the side.
So it's not a sat dive then?
Well, I mean, he's got that many gas bottles. Well, if you scroll on down, you're going to see the picture I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's the one where they got the two divers and they have a rebreather on his back, and he's got a couple, 3 or 4 tanks slung.
Yeah, we'll go down further, and you can see this other guy's got 4 tanks on the side.
Yeah.
That is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, hopefully somebody does a special on this so we get to see some photos.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a nice one. Yeah.
That'll be something to follow up on.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that's a type of wreck that you can work for years and years and years. I mean, just all the mapping of the bottles will take some time.
Well, you figure they started doing this back in 2016. Actually, 2015, 20... Yeah, they've been working on this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Love the pictures, though.
Yep. And then the video of the week we have is from National Geographic. It's videographer Steve Hathaway was filming a tourism promo on October 25 on an island off the coast of New Zealand with his friend Andrew Buddle. Called him over to see something weird. "You've got to be kidding me," Hathaway says as he looks upon hearing what Buddle found. He put on a scuba gear and dove in. It was a 26-foot long, translucent worm-like creature. It looks like a giant windsock. It was a pyrosome big enough for him to swim through, and he'd been looking forward to catching a glimpse of one for years. "Swimming around it is pretty incredible," Buddle says. "We could see hundreds of thousands of tiny creatures right up close. This is because pyrosomes isn't just one animal, it's a free-flowing colony of hundreds or thousands of individual organisms called zooids. Zooids themselves are small multicellular creatures that filter feed by pumping water through their bodies and catching phytoplankton, bacteria, poop particles from animals, and anything else they can clean up. The process of pumping water in one siphon out the other makes them part of a group known as trunicates or sea squirts, another nickname, cockroaches of the sea, for their ability to see food out of even the least hospitable environments. The pyrosomes and its cousin the salp are both hugely important and superabundant in mainly tropical waters as a food source," says Andrew Jeffs, professor of marine science at the University of Auckland. "Both are food for sea creatures, including turtles and Jeff's specialty spiny lobsters. Predators can cling to the tubes for weeks and dine. It's like if humans hang off an elephant and eat it. They can afford to take the time and munch enough to get the goodness out of them. However, animals often die from mistakenly eating plastic bags that look like them and other gelatinous organisms like jellyfish. To feed, pyrosomes swim vertically in the ocean surface at night to catch phytoplankton, then return to the depths when daylight comes, perhaps to avoid daytime feeding predators. These gelatinous tubular bodies glow from natural bioluminescence, which is how they got their nickname pyrosome, which comes from the Greek for fire and body. They can be as small as a centimeter, as big or bigger than the one in the video. The building process includes both sexual and asexual reproduction, says Myro Tessima, zooplankton ecologist at the National Institute of Water and Atmosphere Research in Wellington. They grow rapidly, though how quickly exactly is hard to pin down. There's more research on salps, which are made up of one zooid and are more common than pyrosomes. This may change, however. Decima points out that huge pyrosome bloom in the United States West Coast in 2017 and says more efforts are being made to understand these creatures. That is interesting. Did you get a chance to see the video? Mac, did I lose you?
Yes, you did for a moment. But no, I did not. But I think I saw it last week.
Oh, okay.
And I would have loved to have seen that. But, I don't see things like that. That might freak me out a little.
Yeah.
If I found that in the river, it would definitely freak me.
Well, at first you'd be going, what the heck? What is this? Wow. Well, that does it for Scuba in the news. So we had a Mud Club meeting this week. Was there with a great turnout? Sounds like.
Yep.
Was anybody getting any diving in?
Well, let me start out the other way. Our World Underwater was last week.
Ah, that's right. On
16
Saturday.
and 17. And we did have a number of people who went, and in fact, several people worked there, different booths. And the consensus I'm getting is it had less people than last year. It was condensed more, so it didn't look as... Have you been for a while? You've been a couple of years ago, hadn't you?
It was a couple of years ago was the last time I went.
Okay, and remember how big the space was and how it really wasn't jam-packed?
Yeah, they've got you could drive 2 cars down the aisles.
Yeah,
and then they've got these short rows of about 8 booths deep, and then they just spread everything out so far that it looks like it's empty.
So they consolidated it last year to the off-site place, which basically had 2 major rooms for displays, and then they had several rooms for presentations. And it was the same this year, more condensed. They said the shipwreck ones were very good. They had a separate room for shipwrecks and a separate room for miscellaneous topics. They referenced they were not the name brand speakers that you're used to seeing. Trotter was not there, for example. But most of if you went to a lot of the presentations, you got your money's worth participating.
Excellent.
It was still a lot of, it's for those who are going to be spending a couple of coin and going out where it's warm, and you got good viz.
Yeah.
A lot of shows and a lot of, the islands and travel.
Well, it's who can, for the booth space you're charging for it. It comes down to who can make enough money to justify the booth space. And
absolutely,
your shops can't do it. Your clubs can't do it. So you're just left with some of your larger shops and the tourism and a few of the equipment vendors. And then as attendance goes down, the equipment vendors are going to be less likely to go out because they have a harder time justifying it for,
Yeah.
4,000,
it was suggested
people.
We write into them and suggest strongly they do like they did 30 years ago and invite the dive clubs at a cheap rate. I mean, we can't go and spend $500 for it. Ain't going to happen.
Right.
But you said $50, come and show your club. One, you're going to have the clubs show up more. And if you have the clubs, the people who are in the club will show up. Then you'll be able to talk about all the different clubs, meet other people, and you'll have more people show up like we used to have.
Well, here's a way to do it is you clubs can apply for a booth if they pre-buy 10 tickets. So you get the club members to each buy a ticket to where you got 10 tickets. And if you buy it as pre-buy it early as a group, you can apply for a free booth. That would be the way to do it.
That would be one way, yeah.
Yeah, because you figure what was it? What did it cost to get in? $12?
It was more than that, as I remember, because I know I got a discount with Dan. He gave me another $5 off, but I couldn't tell you right off.
Yeah, but you could do that. They would guarantee 10 tickets, or pick a number, and then you got the groups there, and then you give them a theme, or it's $25 for entry and seminars. So yeah, keep it that price.
This might apply also to the upcoming one we're going to have. That'll be here before you know it. That's what, March 2nd?
Mm-hmm.
That way we have our Shipwreck Festival, Great Lakes Shipwrecks. That'll be something to bring up to them since they're more local and probably talk to them better. And you do know that Go Ships is not going to be on.
Right. Yeah, I heard that. That's
for sure, because 2018 they were not, and they're not able to put it together for this year either. So things are coming down. A lot of the shows that we used to have, the attendance is not there.
Well, and it's not just, dive industry shows. It's all shows. I know a lot of the commercial shows are just not as well attended, whatever industry you're in, because you can get a lot online, and a lot of times the people are having a harder time justifying it. Yep. You gotta make it an event. It's got to be something that you can only do by going to the show.
Mm-hmm.
The presentation, the camaraderie, the meeting other people, the seeing, holding, demoing something. It's got to be along those avenues, and that will help. I mean, you may not be able to reverse the trends, but you may be able to come up with another niche that's sustainable.
Well, it's hard to keep in any club and organization. On Saturday, we also participated in the event there at the library in Niles.
Yeah, I saw
Heard about that, right?
as well. Yep.
Right. Well, the exhibit out of the total items that the Smithsonian had, there was only 6 libraries in Michigan, and Niles was one of them that was able to have this participation in this display, which was quite a big deal. And during the month that the display was there, they had presentations at least every week by a renowned authority on different topics of water.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there at the closing on Saturday, and the clientele, the people who came, were not all divers, but they were all interested in all the aspects of water reclamation, water usage. We had Fernwood. We had several biological gardens out. We had the river people who were cleaning up the Paw Paw River, the Glean River. Let's see who else you had out there. You had flower clubs, but they were looking at it from the invasive species of both land and aquatic.
Yes.
So everything, there was a purpose for everything. And I made sure I went around and talked to everybody at every booth because it was very, very good. And a lot of people came over and wanted to know how we were doing. And most everybody knew about, you're the guys who are doing the ecology dive out there. So we will have more people looking for us again this year. But we had a good time and very informative, and we feel like we contributed. So that was a good event. Nobody's been in the water in the last 4 weeks.
Wow. For the club, that's got to be a record.
That is. People are damaged. Yeah. Kevin's dinged up. I'm dinged up. And generally when we get out, other people follow. We've got a couple. We dove. I went out and was safety for when they dove the pier in January.
Mm-hmm.
But not too much right now.
No, it's a kind of a quiet period.
Yep. But I think that'll start changing if we keep having weather like we're having right now.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think we're on the warm-up trend. I saw an article about a week ago that said they had peak ice. So the ice for the winter will start to be breaking up here pretty soon.
Yep.
Yeah, Karen in the chat room saying Saturday's looking really nice. Well, let's see. Do you have any, like a safety story or anything for this week?
Well, I've got let me switch my paper for a second. I always like to go to Dan because Dan has always got something good. I don't know how long this is going to be, but I'll go through it. Topic starts out as diver using full face mask runs out of air. Case report. While sailing in the Caribbean, 3 fellow divers and I decided to dive a wreck we had dove during a similar sailing trip several years ago. I was the most experienced diver, about 25 years, had assisted with teaching scuba classes for many years while in college. The other 3 divers had fewer than 10 to 20 dives each. One diver had a history of ultra-sensitive gag reflex and was uncomfortable with a regulator mouthpiece in his mouth. Therefore, he had purchased a full face mask, tried it once before his trip. Should he encounter an out-of-air situation, he would have to completely remove his mask to buddy breathe. I recommended for him to place a regular mask around his neck when diving using the full face rig. So if he needed to remove it, the mask, full face, he would be able to put on a regular mask, something he had learned in cave diving. On the day of the particular wreck dive, the diver with the full face mask did not want to bother with carrying a spare mask. Upon entering the water, the divers were so enthralled with the wreck that they all seemed to go in all different directions. Being the gentleman in charge, I corralled them all back together, tried to get the 3 to follow more closely, but the excitement was getting to them and they were wandering about, getting far apart from each other. As the dive leader, I was periodically checking individual air gauges. All 4 of us were consuming about the same route of air. After a few times checking individuals, I began to rely on my gauge to estimate the air. As my pressure gauge reached 1,000, we were moving along the wreck, gradually ascending from a depth of 80 to around 60 feet. Began looking for a mooring line we could follow up for controlled descent. The current on the wreck was strong enough I did not want to try a free ascent, especially with the number of other boats anchored at the wreck site. Quickly found a mooring line, noticed I was at 900 psi, and thought we would all do a safety stop at 15 for a few minutes. I looked around, saw the diver with a full face mask quickly swimming in towards me, signaling he was out of air. I retrieved my octopuses, removed his full face, and he met me at the mooring line. Since the diver did not have a spare mask, he had to pinch his nose, close his eyes, and concentrate only on breathing with water in his face. He was very anxious to ascend, but was breathing okay, so I controlled our ascent. We ascended quickly, but not dangerously so. On the surface, he was fine. Upon reaching the surface, we saw the other two divers on the mooring line below us, making their safety stop. In retrospect, I should have done several things differently. I should have insisted that the diver with the full face mask bring a spare mask. I should have forced the group to stay closer together. I should have been more forceful in monitoring air consumption of all divers. Turned out the diver with the full face mask was consuming quite a bit more air, especially as the tank emptied. On other dives during our trip, he was always the first one out of air, and I wonder if using the full face caused a bit of higher air consumption. No adverse effects were noticed by any of the divers. We made 3 more dives throughout the week. Later dives, the group followed much more closely. We monitored air consumption quite a bit. So the comments, it said, diving from a small private boat without formal organization when compared to diving in formal groups carries a greater risk of incident. Similarly, unscheduled flights on small aircraft in comparison with scheduled flights on large aircraft. Friends tend to follow more leeway with friends or take more responsibility for themselves than what a dive professional would do for a customer. In the case of the more experienced diver, taking responsibility for checking the gauges instead of letting them do it for themselves. In that case, he did the right thing in taking the responsibility, but it was not his. The diver with the hypersensitive gag reflex is at additional risk of drowning if the reflex occurs underwater. He knew a full face would be a solution, but he did not practice enough to use it before the dive trip. It is said that the remaining dives, he wound up taking a dive mask with. So I think he was a little bit lucky.
Yes, certainly he was lucky.
And that would have been complicated or enhanced more had that been ice, cold water.
Yes. Yeah, that would have made it a little bit more challenging.
Absolutely more challenging.
Do you think that his assumption on the full face mask is true? Is it the nature of a full face mask to go through more air?
I don't know. I depend on your excitement level and everything, because I know I've used them a lot, but quite often I'm using surface air, so I never really paid a lot of attention. I know
Right.
Sir Larry wears full face all the time during the winter. His breathing, we both come out with the same amount. But I think that's because it's a low volume. Because it didn't say the type of volume it was on that mask either.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to the diver more than the full face mask. Unless you've got a very sensitive valve that's leaking, like you can in a regular regulator, I can't see where you would really go through more air. I mean, your air volume is going to be the same in your open loop. So,
yeah, because with my Cressy sub, it was basically full face, but it was just a regulator in the mouth. It was not, the mask part was not an open cavity.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of the divators, I think, have more of a volume on the inside.
Yeah.
And sometimes the flow rate, you want to keep it up to keep any fogging up.
Yeah.
But at least he learned and started carrying a spare mask. But again, I think cold water would have been a not so pleasant experience.
Yeah. Because if you're having that problem with, somebody without a mask having a hard time concentrating and breathing, is that normal for somebody? I mean, if I lost my mask, it's something I need to practice. I don't anticipate that I would have a problem breathing out of a regulator.
Well, if somebody had a hypersensitivity gag reflex and I was a dive master, I would really love to know that.
Yes.
And if he knew it already, then he should be prepared for changing out the mask that he didn't try. It said in the article he'd only done it once. I would practice more than once.
Yes.
But I think he was lucky. But
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's had a hypergag reflex.
No, I'm not familiar enough with that. Well, anybody have any dive plans that you've heard of? I mean, you talked about that the river's getting clear.
Now, I think the next big thing will be the trip down to Lansing, basically. Not Lansing, Ann Arbor.
Okay.
For Great Lakes Shipwreck. Actually, there was another one, too. Darn it, and I can't remember which one it was. MSRA?
MSRA, they should be coming up.
They have one coming up. I don't have my material handy there.
Yeah.
Karen usually keeps her finger on the pulse. She might know.
Yeah, MSRA. And then you've got Great Lakes Wrecking Crew. That's probably April time frame for them.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget, we got the mermaids coming back. Excuse me. This year.
Yeah. I was bad. I need to set up an interview with them. So we still need to do that. And I still got, I'm robotic season. I can't think of anything. I'm lucky I can do these. I've got like 6 more weeks of packed craziness going on.
So you're going to be doing this next year after all, or not?
I'll probably do it at least one more year. I'd like to find a replacement. They're trying to talk me into teaching a class at the school, and I'm like, I don't know. So we'll see. Oh. Well, you got anything you want to plug before we end it this week?
Not at this time. I'm anxiously waiting to hear what the joke of the day is.
Yeah, and I'm hoping I didn't already use this one. I swear I'm having a hard time keeping track of things. So, without any further ado, here we go. A scuba diver was driving into town and he fell into a ditch in the middle of a road. A farmer came up and said, "My horse Sebastian can pull you out." The man said, "Okay," and the farmer got Sebastian. When Sebastian was hooked up, the farmer said, "Pull, Ranger. Come on, Benny. Let's go, Delilah." Then the farmer said, "Pull, Sebastian, pull." When the car was out of the ditch, the man said, "I have a question. Why did you say the wrong name 3 times? And the farmer said, "Because Sebastian is blind. If he knew the other horses weren't pulling, he wouldn't even try."
That's good. There's got to be some truth in that statement, too.
It probably is. I wonder if that same works on people, too.
I would think it did and would.
So
I'm surprised that Karen didn't mention National Archaeology Training Workshop 2019 back in Toledo.
Oh, really?
That's in April.
Ah, yeah.
That's April 13, I believe. And we know that Karen and Barb went to that last year and got a lot of good information out of that and practical experience.
Ah, very good. So something we'll have to keep a watch out for.
Yep, it's 3 days, April 13, 14, and then the water day is either May 18th or 19th.
Yes.
But you got to be a scuba diver to participate.
Yep.
Oh, so I'm sorry. You don't have to be a scuba diver to take the training. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, very good. So until next time, go out there and get wet.
And stay safe. Still on?
Craig was, he stayed.
Yep. Still there.